On this episode, doing brake pads, 2002 SV650. So taking them off is kind of easy. I like to clean all the schmutz out, right? This piece may or may not come in your brake kit. So it's a little clippy and it pops in. Just like that. And it's got a little springy action in there. Kind of keeps them from rattling, kind of holds them in place. This piece, brake pads are going to slide on here. This piece goes in here. So a little bit of grease. And then these little rubber boots will slide down on the lips or slide off the lips, depending. You can rotate that a little bit, get them on there, and then this just will slide in and out. So when the brake pads are pushing, it's actually sliding right here to cause the brake friction on the calipers, on the rotors, right? So these need to be lubricated. That doesn't really move. There's nothing on this side, so you have to do it from the inside. So this one is the inner pad. When you get these, check them. Make sure that there's no sharp edges or anything like that that's going to hang up on. Wire brush, some sandpaper, some brake grease. We're going to smear some on here. So you can see that the rings, right, they hook onto this one. Just a little bit of brake grease, right? The grease is going to hold the dust, so not too much. And then this one is going to sit in here like this. On top of this little thing, you just kind of stick it in there. See this hole? That comes later. Same thing. That compressor is whisper quiet. Whisper quiet. So, a little bit of brake grease right here. And then this one, it's got a big hole and a slot. So a big hole right there. And then it just flops in place. Make sure you push the pistons back or you're not going to have enough room. Now, this is what's going to hold them in. This little pin. The pin is steel, so it's subject to rust and all kinds of other stuff. You might be able to see where it was rubbing right there. So here's an easy way to clean this. A drill goes in right here. Lock it into place. And then this is some 1500 grit sandpaper. It's very fine. Just when you're doing that, you're feeling for any kind of ridges, high spots, rust. Get it all off of there, okay? And then again, it's steel, so, you know, the bike's out in the weather. A little bit of the silicone brake grease. So it only goes in one way. It goes through here, and then you can see that slot. Push it down, put it in, see the slot, and it's going to go all the way in. And then it'll twist, and there's a hole. And then there's a little bitty clip. So the clip goes through here. Snaps on. And then this pin is locked in place. So these pads are going to slide on this and slide right here. And it's going to push to close. So then once you got all that on, then your whole assembly is just going to go back onto the forks. So about 39 Newton meters, which is what, 28 foot-pounds. And then 6 millimeters, right? Not too much. 8 to 10. And then this is your little wire clip, brake line holder thingy. That's backwards. Idjit. This side's done. Don't start squeezing on the brakes yet. We gotta do the other side. And now we have a catastrophic audio malfunction. So the rest is commentary. I'm showing you how to pull that little clip out. Just grab with a pair of pliers, pull it out. There's gonna be brake dust down in there. So wire brush, scrape it out, clean it out. You can use the brake cleaner if you want. Scrubbing works just as good, dry. So various assortments of brushes to get all the nooks and crannies, get the brake dust out. If it's supposed to be shiny, make it shiny. If it's not supposed to be shiny, leave it alone. Camera's a little too high, or no, camera angle's a little too low. My work's a little too high. So cleaning off the clip, just remove the brake dust. Just snaps back into place. Again, there's brake dust and grime and stuff on those rods, so clean them off. A little bit of brake grease on there when you're done so that the pads can slide smoothly. It's something you're going to need to do maintenance on every couple of rides, right? You look down there, make sure there's nothing in there, no rocks, no debris. Inner pad goes on that side. Put a little brake grease on the back of it. You can put brake grease on the pots themselves. Put brake grease on that rod, same as the other side. Just slips in, and there's a little clip on there. The little clips on these were a little bit too long, so I just trimmed the edge off a little bit. I know it's obvious, but make sure those pads are separated and that you put the brake rotor in between the pads. Don't get them both on one side and the rotor on the other side where they're not doing any good. You can pull on those brakes and it's going to still work, but you're going to be not using all the brake pads because it'd be grinding against the caliper itself. So, just take your time, double check, take it easy. It'll be okay. Okay, here we are at the back. And what I'm saying is you could probably do this with the wheel still on the bike on the side stand, because these brake pads for the rear go in from the bottom. So you can get down there and do it from the bottom without removing the tire. There's going to be some space issues, but it's possible. So these are the old brake pads. And what I'm saying is the two guys that ride this both said, I never used a rear brake. But obviously somebody used the rear brake, or they're leaving their toe on the brake when they're riding. So those pads are gone. I mean, we were this close to metal on metal. And then for comparison, there's the new pad versus the old pad. So much more material on there. So big difference in the amount of brake pad left. New versus old. So here we are underneath the bike, looking at the bottom of the brake caliper. So those two pads, they just slide up. And then they're also held in by pins. So you just hold them in place and then pins go in. I'm putting the front pin in. There's two little springs that go on those pads. They got a little loop on them and then two arms. So there's the loop. So the loop goes, let's just say towards the outside of the pad, or the non brake pad side, the flat side. And then You're going to push up. It's resting on that front pin, and then you push it up a little bit, and you put the back pin in, so it goes over the spring arm and then through the hole in the brake pad. And then don't push it all the way in, because now we got to put the other one on. You still got to kind of hold the pad on there. And I guess it popped off when I pulled it out. So now it's on there. And grab the next one. The loop goes to the flat side, not the pad side. Got it on the front one. Then push it up and slide the rod underneath it. So the spring puts a little pressure on those pads, keeps them from rattling. And then all we have to do is get the clips, same as the front. There's going to be a hole in there. You might have to rotate those rods a little bit to get the hole where you can see it from the bottom. Maybe, yeah, you can see that front hole. Except now my light is in the way. Hey, move your light. Okay. Now the light's blinding us. So a little clip. Stick it through the hole. Push it on until it snaps. Piece of cake. Then we do the back rod. And the rear brake has a little dust cover. It's going to snap onto the bottom. And that's to help keep road dirt and other stuff from flying up in there and binding up the pads. So that's another thing you're going to want to put on your maintenance schedule. Every once in a while, pop that thing off, blow it out of there, make sure there's no rocks jammed up in there, anything like that. So now brakes are done. Now we're going to have to install the rear tire. So I'm pulling off the sprocket. Inside there are rubbers. It's called a cush drive. Inside there is a bearing. This piece comes out, and inside is a bearing. So some grease on that bearing. It's not sealed on the backside, and then that pushes right back in, and the cush drive goes back on the wheel. Cush drive can go in any way, but it only goes one way, where if it's flush, it's got to go in the grooves. And then there's the front side of the bearing and your dust cap. So a little bit of grease on there because it's rotating. It's going to be spinning on metal. So just a little bit of lubrication. So there's your spacer. You can see the grooves, rub marks on there from that grease fitting. Just pop it back in. If you don't shake it too much, it'll stay. So I'm going to spin the tire around, show you the caliper side. I'm sorry, the rotor side. So that's a sealed bearing on that side. You don't have to worry about grease on that. But then there's going to be another spacer that goes on this side that goes up against the brake caliper assembly, the hanger. So that fits right in there. It's held in by the axle, and it doesn't spin. The wheel's going to spin, so just a little bit of grease on there kind of makes it sticky, so it'll help it stay in place when you're trying to put all this together. Tire only goes on one way, so we're looking at the chain on this side, so the sprocket's going to go on this side. So these are what you use to adjust the tension on the chain once everything's installed. So it slides in there, it only goes in one way. Match up the outside grooves, you'll figure it out. You can't put it in upside down. It's impossible. Well, nothing's impossible, but try not to put them in upside down. You'll see they only go in one way. They don't really move, but they do slide back and forth a little bit when you're doing some chain adjustments. So just a little bit of grease, and then it's just going to fit right back in there and slide into place. And then that screw sticking out, that's your chain tensioner adjustment mechanism. So push them forward. We'll get to the chain part once we get the wheel on. We gotta make sure the wheel's straight, and we gotta make sure that the chain slack is adjusted to within specs. So Suzuki says chain 20 to 30 millimeters of play whenever you've got it set. So I'm showing you this part because I'm not perfect. Sometimes I get ahead of myself. So here I am. I'm putting the tire on. And where's the chain? Not where it belongs. So I got the axle in. Got to get a BFH to bang it in a little bit. Tap, tap, tap. See that one part keeps giving me trouble. Push it forward a little bit. There comes the axle. And then he says, ding dong, you didn't put the chain on. So do it again. So brake rotors in between the pads and the caliper. This whole time we're pushing the wheel forward to get this chain on. Now we're going to have to push it a little bit more forward. We're going to have to pick it up a little bit. There we go. So that's actually what I did is I dropped the brake caliper down. Now we got to get the brake caliper back up. And I'm going to switch sides so you can see better. So what we're looking at is the brake pad on the rotor. Make sure that the pads are separated and that the rotor is in between the two new brake pads. Sounds simple. It is simple, but you saw me not to put the chain on, so It's entirely possible to put that thing on and have it on the other side of both of the pads. So we're putting that little wheel spacer in, and then we have to get the brake caliper assembly up on the other side of it, and it's giving me some fits. Tire's a little twisted. Every time you think you got it, it starts fighting again. It's one of those things. Okay, so caliper's up. In comes the axle. So it's going through that chain tensioner assembly. Then we're going to pick the tire up and get it through the brake caliper assembly, and then through the spacer, and then through the tire. See how the tire wants to cant over a little bit? So it's helpful to hold it up and get everything going as much as you can. You can put a little bit of grease on that thing, but it just makes it harder for you to grab it. It's not really necessary because it's a non-spinning part. All the parts that are on there, all of those bearings, they're not spinning on that. They're spinning on themselves. So we pretty much got it started. It's through all the important parts. Now we're just going to tap it in. BFH, it's your friend. It's otherwise known as a dead blow hammer. Now we're going to switch sides again so you can see it coming through the other side. And the light's not blinding us anymore. So when we're putting on this side, the hole is a little bit too far back. So I'm going to take a pair of pliers and just give it a little push on the hole itself, move it up just a tad. Here come the pliers. Just put it on the hole, give it a little tap, move it forward just enough to get that axle all the way through. Here it comes. So that's your big flat washer. There's one on either side. And so what that does is that lines up with the grooves, the marks on the swing arm itself to help you center this tire to make sure it's straight. So I think we're pretty close to the fourth mark. So we're going to line up off of that. And what I'm doing is just hand tightening this nut because I don't want it to move around too much once we start making our adjustments. And then what we're going to do after all of that, we'll torque it down. But for now, just hand tight. So when we're measuring the slack in the chain, we want to do that from kind of like the center between the axle, between the two sprockets, right? You can see that there's a lot of play. I was measuring, it's a ruler in millimeters, so it was like 45 millimeters of travel. It's kind of a lot. So we're going to have to adjust the chain back, or the wheel back, in order to tighten up that chain a little bit. So on this motorcycle, the adjuster screw is 5 millimeter Allen head. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to adjust both sides to match. So if you're on the fourth bar on the sprocket side, then be at the fourth bar on the caliper side, the brake rotor side. So here what I'm doing is I'm just over tightening so you can see it. So see how tight that chain is? That's not 20 to 30 millimeters of flex. And when I spin it, if you could hear it, you can hear the chain loudly. So it's too tight, right? So now we're going to back everything and make a match. 4 bars on this side, 4 bars on the other side. And it's a bit of a back and forth as far as making sure everything lines up on the same side, keeping the tire straight, and then getting the chain adjusted to the right millimeter of play. So 20 to 30 millimeters of slack on the chain. So I'm going back and forth, spinning, checking. That's pretty good right there. I think it's a little loose. So I'm going to put the ruler on it, take a measurement, and see what it looks like. Spin the chain. So on that chain, there's going to be a loose side and a tight side. So we're measuring from the tight part of the chain or the loose part of the chain, and we're going to keep spinning it and checking it. So now we're going to check the play between 20 and 30 millimeters. Push up, look at it, then pull down. Try to measure from the same side of the chain. So I'm happy with that slack in the chain. But now, just like to take the extra step sometimes to verify that the tire's straight. So I'm going to take a measurement off the end of this swing arm to the big rectangle washer. So I'm going to measure on this side, see what my reading is, and then I'll switch sides and measure on the other side, and I want them to match as close as they can. So I think when I measured on the other side, I was off by 5/10. So it measures in millimeters. So that's really not too much. But if you can make it closer, just try and make it closer. If you're lining up on the bars, it's an eyeball thing. 4 bars on this side, 4 bars on that side, space between the bars, make it match. But if you have the measurement device, you could use a tape measure, but it's not going to be as accurate If you have one, then, break it out and use it. That way you know your tire's straight. As long as the swing arm's straight and everything else is straight. But, it's straight. So now it's time to torque it up. So I would think torque specs on this thing was 63 Newton meters. I'm doing this from memory because I can't hear myself talk. I'm just tightening it up halfway. I'm going to like 30. And then I'm going to spin the tire and check the chain again. Sometimes when you tighten these things up, that chain's going to tighten up. So you still got to have the play in it. It's good. Tighten it all the way up. 63 Newton meters, I think. I can look it up later and verify that. So, boom, Bob's your uncle. We got the wheel torqued down. Check the chain. Still got your slack in there. We're good. And then there's a cotter pin that goes through the nut, through the axle. So if it's not lined up, tighten the nut to expose the hole to get your pin in there. Once you got everything back together, go get your rag with some cleaner on it. Get all your greasy fingerprints off the rim, off the swing arm, of everything you just touched, because you just spent all your time cleaning your bike. You don't want it to be all dirty when you go back. So I'm just wiping all the schmutz off the chain, and then I'm looking at it, and there's some grease on there. Somebody was running that chain wax stuff. It accumulates on the side of the chain, on the inside of the chain. So I'm just scraping that off. And then we'll wipe it down with a rag, clean the chain off. And then before we go ride, we're going to lubricate the chain with some oil. I don't use chain wax. I lube the chain before I ride. I clean it when I get back. And then I lube it before I ride again. So it's a maintenance issue. Keep your chain oiled. It'll last. That chain wax attracts dirt, road dirt, grease, grime, all kind of stuff. So I'm not a fan of it. Good old-fashioned oil works just fine. And then we're done. So here's the part where I say, thanks for watching. Y'all take care. See you next time. Enjoy your ride.